everybody, and welcome back to the KK Zone. As always, I am Kara Kaufman, here again with another special treat. Yankees have finished their set with the Braves, and they are currently en route to Cleveland to take on the not for much longer named Indians in a 4-game set. I have Kyle, a wonderful Indians fan and very knowledgeable about all things Cleveland, here to talk to me about the team. We got into a lot of stuff, including a top prospect you should watch for a possible debut later this season, including possible new names, whole bunch of fun stuff in there. I hope you enjoy. Kyle, hi. Thank you so much for joining me on this Zoom tonight.
Oh, of course, it's awesome to be able to spend any evening talking baseball.
Right? It's the best thing to do, and it's so much harder when you can't actually be places. So Zoom's the spot now.
That's right. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have fans returning to stadiums soon.
Yeah. Where are you right now? Where are you coming from?
I actually live in the Bronx. So weird that I'm talking to you from the other side of the table, but yeah, my fiance and I moved here just before the whole pandemic thing started happening. But I was born and raised in Cleveland, lived there for first 22 years of my life, and you know, can't put on the pinstripes just because I live in the Bronx.
That's okay. I completely understand that and appreciate that. But welcome to New York. I mean, I grew up, born and raised here. I'm in Manhattan, so I'm a little south of you, but that's why I'm a Yankees fan. But also, I hope you enjoy this wonderful city once you can get out and enjoy it a little bit. I'm sorry you haven't been able to do much yet.
Well, I have lived in New York for several years. We've moved to the Bronx recently, but before that, I was in Astoria for a pretty long time, and I actually got to go to the Yankees Indians ALDS game 3, I think it was, back in 2017 when the Indians were up 2-0, and I was going to the third game. I was like, this is it, we're going to close it. The most fascinating part was taking the D train up north, and just being in a sea of Yankees uniforms wearing my Indians jersey. As you know, Yankees fans are super passionate, so I got jeered or heckled a little in the subway. It was a good time.
I'm sure. Well, now you live so close. Next time the Indians are in town, well, maybe not this time, but maybe later in the season or next season when they're back and the restrictions are gone, you can go so easily, just like, a couple stops away.
Yeah, that's it. I try to get to a game at least once a year. I was actually I was in the Bronx watching part of the streak when we had that 22 game win streak.
Oh, yeah.
My buddy James and I, who we saw that doubleheader, which I think ended up being games 7 and 8. So that was pretty magical. And the Yankee Stadium is just such a beautiful, beautiful place to watch a baseball game.
It's nice. I like it. I'm glad that you like it too. Some people really hate it, but as someone who didn't spend a lot of my life at the old stadium, and therefore I'm not comparing it to that sort of previous spiritual house of worship of the Yankees, this one feels pretty good to me, and I've had some great memories there. So that does it for me. But for you, how did you become a Cleveland Indians fan besides growing up in Cleveland?
Sure. Well, I mean, the simplest answer is my dad. Like I played baseball when I was a kid, and my dad grew up in Ohio, like born and raised, never left through his entire childhood and most of his adult life until he recently moved to North Carolina. And there was an All-Star game in Cleveland in 1997 when I was 8 years old, and I had always watched the Indians with my dad on TV. There had been that magical 95 World Series run, and 97 turned out later to be a World Series run year as well. But at the All-Star Game Fan Fest, I got to meet one of my favorite players at the time, who was David Justice, who was also a Yankee at one point during his career. And my dad did this virtual like home run hitting thing, like these virtual batting cages, and he actually smacked a home run and won tickets to the home run derby. And seeing my dad hit a home run right in front of me, on even though it was on a virtual batting screen, was pretty cool experience. And I got to watch Sandy Alomar win that game for the Indians with a home run over I guess it was like just inside the left field foul post. It was, as I remember it. And be the All-Star Game MVP in my hometown, and that was pretty cool for me because as you may know, there was another All-Star game hosted in Cleveland recently in 2019, and another Cleveland Indian, Shane Bieber, struck out the side in like the fifth inning or sixth inning or something, and he got to take home the MVP. And all I could think about the whole time was all those little 8-year-olds who were just like me when I was a kid, right? Who got to experience that same magic of seeing all the players and meeting the players and watching one of them become the all-star of all-stars, right in front of their eyes.
That's awesome. I think that is almost everyone's stories go back to ballpark memories and just a moment when you realize things were so cool and you want to follow them forever. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I've never been to an all-star game, but that sounds incredible. I can't wait for it to come back to New York so I can finagle my way in somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they'll have one up here eventually, and there are 2 ballparks. If it's in Citi Field or if it's in Yankee Stadium, you got double the chance of being able to visit one.
I'm on the record saying I go to any baseball you put in front of me. I've been to Citi Field many times. I am happy to go, so I cannot wait for a New York All-Star game. But what a great story. I love everything about that, and I also love the idea of the home run machine, which I have never really seen or taken part in. But that sounds memorable and delightful. Good job, Dan.
It was pretty cool because it was like super new at the time, right? There wasn't a whole lot of virtual stuff happening. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wow, yeah, that's very futuristic. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So speaking of, the Indians, last season was obviously very weird for everybody for all the possible reasons. But looking at how that went, it went decently well for your guys. I mean, they ended up being 10 games over 500. 35-25 in the short season, tied for second in the division, but they won the tiebreaker over those White Sox, finished just behind the Twins, only out by a game. But that was good for the 4th seed in the American League. Unfortunately, you ran into my guys in the first round, and I have to tell you honestly, I was not expecting the series to go quite like that.
I don't think anybody was. I mean, the thing is, like, as a Cleveland fan, I complained about the offense all year. The Dolans have a habit of pinching pennies when it comes to the roster, so it's kind of up to Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff to work as much magic as they can on a really tight shoestring budget. But like, the crazy thing about those 2 games is that the offense did exactly what it was supposed to do. They scratched out 2 or 3 runs against Garrett Cole, right? And we had Shane Bieber on the mound. Under normal circumstances, you give Shane Bieber 2 or 3 runs across the plate, like, that's a recipe for victory. But he got, like, the Yankees must have had some really good book on him or something, like a great scouting report, because I think they tagged him for 7 runs in 4 2/3 innings, something like that. Maybe it was 9 runs.
It was a lot. It was, I don't think time. It was a lot, and it was. I mean, I sat down to watch that game. I had the Yankees winning that series, I thought, but I didn't think it would be like that. And I was, I had watched, like everyone else, the Shane Bieber's incredible season that he had. And our offense was, to be honest with you, offense what the Yankees are built around, but last season was all over the place. And I throw most of last year out for almost all players because that's hard. Everything about that was a hard, abnormal, stressful, not to mention just everything about living last year was hard. So playing baseball was also hard. That being said, they had a really inconsistent, frustrating season to watch last year, up and down all over the place. And so we're not quite sure which team would show up. I said about the season last year, they either looked like a team that would never lose again or a team that would never win again. And there wasn't really an in-between. So against the Indians, they became the team that would never lose again temporarily, and just found every way to hit. But prior to that, because you ended up being a seed above us, we were the 5th seed. What did you take away, if anything, from last season, and what were your impressions that stuck?
I mean, as far as baseball goes specifically, a 60-game season doesn't tell you much. That's one thing that I just made sure to take away very, very, surely, for lack of a better word. It's hard to judge any team on their first or last 60 games of a season, because that's why we play 162. Like, you can get insights, but at the end of the day, and with 60 games, it's a large enough sample, whereas we saw the most talented teams rise above, some teams you don't expect snuck in there, like the Marlins, but it happens every year. it was also like we played a full season of games, so 16 teams could get in the playoffs. It's like, oh, okay, who are we really excluding then? Just basically the teams that weren't even trying, right? But another thing I took away as far as the Indians specifically was, the club's ability to develop pitching. It just keeps unearthing gems and miracles again and again. Whatever they are doing in the minor leagues down there. I watched some video once on it. A lot of it just is based around like teaching right-handers how to like tunnel in, and I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds fancy and like baseball talk. Yeah, but the Indians just never, like, for the last 8 years they have consistently developed solid starting pitchers from within the system, and with Corey Kluber and Carlos Carrasco and Mike Clevenger and Trevor Bauer now, like, all being gone within the last 2 years, there is still, like, their rotation is still in the top third, maybe top fourth of all of baseball. And it's just a testament to their ability to develop it from within the farm system.
Yeah, that is what I think of, because I obviously don't watch your team every day, but I watch them when they play my guys, and I read enough about baseball to have a general sense. But my thought always on Cleveland is, damn, that pitching, it is always so good. And as you say, they traded away 4 legitimate, really good starters, and somehow pitching is still their strength. And so that's when I look at that team, I think, do not want to face them when their pitchers are all healthy and on, because yikes. Though I do also often think, don't know if the offense really scares me. So just depends on which rock versus the hard place, like, immovable force and, a movable object. What's going to happen?
It's so interesting because, like, right now you look at the Indians lineup every day, and half of it is always, top prospects who haven't quite gotten there. Yeah. Or former top prospects who haven't got, like Austin Hedges at one time, was a big prospect within the San Diego system. He's on the Indians roster as a defense first catcher now, like guys like Josh Naylor and who else do I think like Jake Bowers, who's never really worked out and is probably on the road to getting cut pretty soon. It's like there's so much potential there, and so it's kind of an interesting cast of characters, but it's like the front office is kind of waiting for a few of them to catch fire. And the one person that looks a little bit like there's some optimism around, for me right now at least, is Andres Jimenez. The shortstop we got back in exchange for Francisco Lindor.
One of the shortstops we got back.
Yeah. He will never be the Lindor that we that we loved for so many years, who's just a great guy who just like loves playing the game of baseball, right? But Andres Jimenez he's only batting like 230 or something, but he's slugging 500 at this point in the season, and it's still early on, but like he's a shortstop who's carrying an 800 OPS, and that's kind of all you really ask for from a shortstop. So there's some interesting potential in that bat right now, and his defense is above average too.
Yeah, that's a guy that was on my radar, being a New Yorker and knowing Mets fans were really excited about him. I mean, Mets fans obviously should be excited about Lindor, but because we're New Yorkers and can never be satisfied with things, people were mad that they lost him more than anybody else in that trade, I think. So that's exciting. And also a very good segue into talking about the changes in the postseason, in the offseason between last year's team and this year's team, because as we have referenced multiple times already, there was some roster turnover for you guys that definitely changed the look. And the biggest thing, of course, was trading franchise cornerstone Francisco Lindor, who, in addition to being an insanely talented player, is so fun to watch. Mr. Smile, right? That's what they call him. Unbelievable. Yeah. And why a smaller market team like Cleveland needs to trade their stars to try and get value for them when they know they can't retain them at market value, which is just an unfortunate reality. I mean, do we really believe that? Maybe not, but
we don't. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I've seen some. Major League Baseball has this thing where they don't open their books to the public, so like we'll never really know. And it's like there's kind of some mistrust in there just from that alone, right? But like, the value of the franchise has also increased by like something like 100 million every year for the last 10 years. And, they don't have the best TV deal, but they're one of the most watched teams on television. They struggle to draw fans to the ballpark, but like with the Dolan family being worth like $4.6 billion, which is in the top 5 in all of Major League Baseball, like everybody in Cleveland, I shouldn't say everybody. There's some, diehard Dolan supporters that I don't understand, but most of us are like, we know that it's not a reality that we have to suffer a $50 million payroll as a team. We've seen the team support $120 million payroll before. And from 2017, I think, to 2018, the team could have retained Michael Brantley at, whatever the Astros got him at. And they would have had that alone. Maybe it was 2018 to 2019. I can't remember exactly, but judging by Michael Brantley's performance that year and his WAR figure, his wins above replacement, that would have put them in the playoffs, adding those wins to their total. And so, I kind of am of the camp that it's not an unfortunate reality that small market team can't afford it. It's an unfortunate reality that, we happen to have owners who place profits over the well-being of the team and the product they're putting on the field. It's just not fun to see that happen, especially for a team that you've loved since childhood, that the Jacobs used to spend money on every year.
Couldn't agree with you more. Yes, I guess I that was poorly phrased on my part, because you couldn't be more right. It's not an unfortunate reality. It is an unfortunate self-imposed reality of very wealthy owners who, let's be clear, own teams because they make money off teams, not because they're running a charity. So clearly, yes, it is profitable. They can afford it. They're choosing not to, and using by excuse that they're in a small market, which, is patently all pretty untrue. So you are totally right. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a pet peeve of mine as well. Even though Yankees run one of the highest payrolls in baseball, they still, we just traded for Rougned Odor because he costs $0 in luxury tax. That's literally why we traded for him. There's no other reason. And that's stupid. You're like, we need someone, and that's not the guy we need. No offense to Rugi, who I'm sure is lovely. But that's, what are we doing? We're the Yankees. But any team can say the same, which is, you have money, and the idea is to create a product that is entertaining to watch. And it's hard to do that when you're a Cleveland team that trades away a guy everybody is obsessed with, rightly so, and doesn't have any outfielders that are really that interesting for 3 years in a row. Like, why? There's no reason. And as you referenced, the return from that Lindor deal was Andres Jimenez, who I think is legitimately a guy who's exciting. Ahmed Rosario, who is a guy that was a top prospect that hasn't quite panned out, as you referenced. He's still pretty young, so he could. And now he's playing center field, maybe, which, if he can, okay. And then 2 kind of more minor leaguey dudes who I don't think we've seen yet. None of that is a Lindor.
Yeah, and the thing that was surprising to everybody in Cleveland that I talked to was that we knew that the Dolans were going to force the front office to trade Lindor and get something back for him, because even though they very well could have afforded to give him the contract that he got from the Mets and still have been slightly below their 2019 payroll, they chose not to. The craziest part was that they threw away Carlos Carrasco in that deal too. Yeah. That was, I think, what stunned the fan base in Cleveland, because Carlos Carrasco was if there was a heart and soul of this team, it was Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco.
Yes.
Jose Ramirez is the balls of the team, right? But heart and soul was Lindor and Carrasco. And Carrasco was a great story coming up, because he was kind of an add in the Cliff Lee trade way back when, I think 2009, who just struggled for years, had a Tommy John surgery, came back, had some head case issues, and was eventually relegated to the bullpen, where a lot of starting pitchers end up, and he started doing really well. But then pitching coach at the time, Mickey Callaway, came back to Terry Francona and was like, hey, what this guy has shown in the bullpen is really, really impressive. He got another chance to start because of that. And then he was Carlos Carrasco, the Carlos Carrasco that we know for so many years. And he took team-friendly extension after team-friendly extension to stay in Cleveland because he loved being there. And he was a year away from getting his 10-5 rights, which means he would have had the ability to veto any trade involving him. And so he was just kind of shuffled off to the Mets because, you know, he was making something like, I don't know, 20 or 22 million a year. And that was the part about the trade that kind of hurt the most. Was it's like, not only are we losing Lindor, who we kind of expected to lose, but boom, Carlos Carrasco's gone too. And he's injured now, I think, which isn't entirely the point, but that was pretty tough.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really important point, because that to me was part of what made the trade so excellent for the Mets also, is that they also got him. Yeah, I watching players that you love, and especially players that you feel a personal connection to because they love the city they're in, because they incorporate themselves into the community. That is the hardest part, I think, of being a sports fan, is watching guys like that get traded. That's hard.
Well, you know, he was also one of the last remaining players from that 2016 World Series run. I think the only players left on the roster from that team now are Roberto Perez and Jose Ramirez. And so that was another thing. It was like, oh, wow, who is this team now? It's like, I don't recognize them from 5 years ago, which is not uncommon in baseball, but it's less common in larger markets. You know, the Yankees got to enjoy CC Sabathia for many, many years, who was also a player that the Indians couldn't afford to re-sign. So yeah, it's just really interesting watching that churn over the last couple of years, Carrasco included.
CC talks a lot because he has a podcast that is my favorite thing that I plug all the time. He and one of the Yankees commentator guys who also does basketball, Ryan Rucco, have an incredible podcast called R2C2 that I can't recommend highly enough, because they are delightful and really fun together. And they get a bunch of people on to talk to a lot of baseball players, as you would expect, but also other athletes and also non-athletes, just really, really good stuff. But CC is always talking about how much he loved Cleveland, how much when he came up, he said, as players, you know, when you get in that organization, you watch what's happening above you and everyone gets traded, but you always think, nah, they're going to keep me because I'm going to be an Indian for my entire career. And then all of a sudden you're not. And it's hard because he credits that organization with so much of his success, just training him how to be an adult and how to, be a mature player. It's really lovely to hear he had such a great experience with everyone on that team. So if that makes it any better.
Yeah, well, it was the same thing with Victor Martinez, who I'm sure you remember. He hit free agency or something, and I think he hit free agency. I'm not pretty sure he wasn't one of the guys that was traded, but like I remember watching like a tear-filled speech for him when he realized he wasn't coming back to Cleveland. And it was just like, because Cleveland was a place that he loved, just like Carlos Carrasco. You hear these stories about like when he was traded, he spent time on the phone crying to Chris Antonetti. And like, it's like, I don't know. It's like the closest thing we have to like a lifer on the team is Jose Ramirez, who is, who may spend the rest of his time in Cleveland. By the time his contract is up, he'll be like 33, 34 or something. And, it's not as likely that those players are going to flee somewhere else, right? But it's just so odd. Like you said, that even the players that love Cleveland and that want to stay, or players like Carrasco who take team-friendly deals just to be there, those are the guys that it's hardest to see go. Mm-hmm. You want a consistent face to your franchise. You want to be able to buy a jersey. Sometimes you can't.
No, although ostensibly you could, now that you're in New York, go to Citi Field and wear that jersey, and people would probably appreciate it. And you might not appreciate it, but
it's retro.
We love Francisco. That's all really a good point. looking at my list of other people that you lost, no one will approach Carrasco and Lindor, of course, but also a couple of relievers in Adam Simber, who I think was actually pretty good for y'all last year, and Brad Hand, who was great. They both left in free agency, if I'm not mistaken. Simber actually was non-tendered somehow, and then
so was Brad Hand. Well, he wasn't non-tendered. Brad Hand was passed through waivers. Yeah, Simber was never like Simber. Brad Hand and Adam Simber actually came to Cleveland in the same trade. They came, both as a package deal for then top prospect Francisco Mejia, who is a catcher, who may not stick a catcher, who went to the Padres organization.
Not anymore. Now he's with the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's having a good start to his year, I can tell you.
I had not noticed that.
He was in the Blake Snell trade.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right. I do remember that. Huh. Wow. Wild. Yeah, the Indians and the Padres have been great trade partners over the last, many years. Corey Kluber was a Padre to start his career. And we also I think it was Trevor Bauer went to Cincinnati in a 3-way trade with the Padres where we got Franmil Reyes and Logan Allen, a couple other guys. But it was almost disrespectful to see Brad Hand shoved through waivers at the end of the season because there was just too much financial risk involved. He's a very, very good pitcher, one of the top 5 relievers in baseball over the past several years. And it was the bullpen's kind of fine even without him. There were some stretches Brad Hand had where he seemed gassed or whatever, but overall, he was a really solid pitcher, and the underlying advanced metrics really showed him to be an incredible reliever. And he has a left hand that throws the ball, which always makes people infinitely more valuable, it seems. But yeah, that was interesting. Simber, he never really worked out. He was supposed to be an amazing, inclusion in that trade, but he never really it seemed like he never really got going at the right time. So the bullpen, over the past couple of years has been good. And I think it's staying good this year. Emanuel Klosse has kind of risen from the ashes of PED suspension and whatever muscle injury he had. And, that looks good in the early going.
Yeah, the bullpen. So that's a good transition. Talking about the current roster, the only other person I think left that was of note to me was Santana, who, whatever. He did just, fun fact, get to his 1,000th career walk. He's with the Royals now, of all places. Also, Brad Hand, for what's worth, currently has a 0 ERA in Washington, and he looks like he's doing pretty good work. So sorry.
One would expect that he would.
But yeah, so the current roster, the bullpen is, I looked at those names and to refresh myself, and I was like, oh, I actually know most of these names, which means that they're doing something pretty well, because that's usually how I hear about folks. And right now, I know ERA is not really the best stat to measure, but I was doing just a quick look, and they are 6th right now, your bullpen, amongst bullpens in all of baseball, which is great. And bullpens are notoriously, relievers are very volatile, especially ERA, because it's such a small inning number that it just jumps the second you allow a single run. But all the stuff looks really good. And yeah, Emanuel, how do we say it? Is it Klosse?
Not sure. Honestly, never actually heard it pronounced.
Yeah.
Or if I have, I wasn't paying close enough attention.
Well, if you don't know, then I will not presume to know. But yeah, he is your closer right now, and he's looking really good. And then you've also got James Karinchak, who I have on my fantasy team because I think he's really, really good. And can't believe he's still pitching. Oliver Perez, unbelievable, 39 years old. And the 3 of them have all not allowed a run yet.
Yeah, the biggest interesting surprise has been Brian Shaw coming back. Good old, back in the glory days of Joe Smith, Brian Shaw, and Cody Allen, holding down the back end of the bullpen. That was maybe only a couple of years ago. But Brian Shaw went to the Rockies and got hammered, as pitchers are wont to do in Colorado. But there were some other things. He was always kind of on the decline, and Brian Shaw was kind of always drew the ire of fans because he seemed to be always blowing up in very, very unfortunate spots. And then the rest of his appearances, he was lights out, but the fans kind of only remember the blow-ups.
Always. All fans.
But they've been calling him Uncle Brian this year. He's been kind of like a good grounding presence. He's been solid, if unspectacular. And it's interesting to have that veteran presence in the bullpen because, there's a lot of young guys in there. With lefty Oliver Perez and righty Brian Shaw kind of like, being the fun uncles in the bullpen, like there's some cool stuff happening. It's kind of what did we used to call the bullpen back in the day? There was a name for the Cleveland Indians bullpen. I can't remember what it was. Something squad. But it's kind of now like it's reminiscent of those days where like there's just a whole cast of interesting characters and kind of two older guys holding down the fort.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I love it because you do a lot. First of all, certainly sometimes when you have young pitchers, having them in the bullpen is a good way to limit their innings. They might later end up being starters. Not always anymore, but certainly that happens. And also just guys getting a tryout in the major leagues usually start out in the bullpen most of the time. So that makes sense to me. A lot of young guys plus the mentors. You have a former Yankees draft pick, I believe, in Trevor Stephan in your bullpen. Who?
That's right. Yeah, Rule 5.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know that he's doing all that well. Actually, I kind of want to look up his stats real quick.
Not great, but this is his first time in the majors. He was pretty. I mean, also to be fair, the Red Sox also took a pitcher in the Rule 5 from us, and he is killing it. So it can happen. Garrett Whitlock.
Yeah, the Rule 5 draft is an amazing thing. Can we talk about that for a second? Oh yeah, Mr. Stephan is not having a great intro to his career so far, but all he really has to do is stay on the roster, until the end of the year, and that's then he's ours permanently. It's just so awesome that this rule was created to make sure that players who are being held in the minors for too long by their team, if they do really well, then they get a chance at the majors anyway, right? A team can pick them through this magical Rule 5 draft process, and if they weren't sticking on a major league roster all year, then they get to stick on a major league roster all year, whether their old team wanted to promote them or not.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it definitely does help with the talent logjam problem. And of course, a lot of your Rule 5 draft picks come from teams like the Dodgers, like the Yankees, who just have a ton of talent and are less likely to take a shot on a young guy and put him on the roster when they are, they're looking to contend immediately. I mean, for me, one of the coolest stories of this year is Akil Baddoo, my new favorite player on the Tigers, who was a Rule 5 draft pick because the Twins didn't protect him. And that's, it happens. And I mean, you make sense if you think about it, because he was coming off surgery on his non-throwing arm, and he never played above A ball. So I guess they figured, would anyone really take him and keep him on their roster? Well, there's a lot of season left to go, but early returns are promising, and that guy is so fun. So yeah, it's great to see talent like that get a chance to be in the major leagues. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. I mean, the Tigers have had more success with the Rule 5 recently, and Victor Reyes a couple of years back, who also is like a permanent fixture on their roster right now. I mean, he's another one of those guys that's like he's solid, not quite spectacular, but like, he's a Tiger now because of this rule that lets talented players get a shot at the majors sooner than they otherwise might.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great. It's frustrating when you watch your guys get stolen away, but and sometimes I will say one of the last people the Yankees lost in the Rule 5 draft permanently was young catcher Luis Torrens, who similarly was like 19 and hadn't played above A ball, and the then tanking Padres took him and kept him on the roster for the whole year, even though he was not at all ready for the majors because they didn't care because they were going to lose 100 games, which was interesting. Yep. It was interesting to watch. And now he's at an age where he's finally coming into his own, and that's awesome for him and them. But at the time it was like, we can't do that, but I guess I'm glad you can. Good for the kid. Get your major league salary, get your health insurance, get your service time, all that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's what the Mets, was it the Mets that did that with Johan Santana like many, many years ago, who ended up, becoming a 2-time Cy Young winner? Like, God, like it's just like figuring out who to protect. Like the Indians got 2 players selected by the Rule 5 for out of the Rule 5 draft this year. And one of them, Kai Tom, I think was just designated for assignment by the A's. And so he's probably on his way back to Cleveland. But like, I don't know. It's just, I think we're saying the same thing. It's just like interesting to see these talented players like get a chance. And it's interesting that, you know, tanking teams can kind of acquire talent through another method, even if it's kind of like they have no intention of winning, and that's not where they have the player on. They take the player because they think that, you know, he'll come in handy when they can win again.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And it certainly helps those players, as you said. That's the beneficiaries are, that's the tanking teams that can plan for the future, and the players who are going to an organization that they can really help build, I guess, if they do pan out, which sometimes doesn't happen because it's hard. Baseball is a really hard game, and sometimes doesn't pan out. But yeah, no, you're totally right. And then so your bullpen, all of that is to say, Rule 5 draft is great, and your bullpen is also great. And that's exciting for you. Not so much for me, but for you. I'm happy for you. But you're also your starters, who are also, as you say, definitely at least a top third, if not top quarter rotation, I would say. But I don't even know all these guys. So Shane Bieber, we've already talked about Shane Bieber. He's off an unbelievable start, too. He had a crazy year last year. He won the Cy Young, so best pitcher in the league. And he's on track to have another fantastic year. So I'm kind of excited to watch him. We get a Shane Bieber, Garrett Cole head-to-head in our third game of our series coming up. So that's fun. And then Zach Plesac, I know, also is not super new. I'm aware of him and Aaron Saval. Is that how we say it?
I think so, yeah.
Those guys. But then I do not know from Logan Allen or Tristan Mckenzie. Tell me.
Yeah, so those two guys, so Logan Allen, as I mentioned earlier, came over in the Trevor Bauer trade. You know, there was this running joke in Cleveland that like Trevor Bauer was just like the what they got in that trade was incredible. You know, besides obviously like the only two major league ready pieces were Yasiel Puig and Franmil Reyes.
I forgot Puig was in that trade.
Yeah, right. It was just I think he was in there as a money thing, like, you know, just to balance out like dollars. But you know, Logan Allen was an interesting piece in that trade, who was a former top prospect, you know, with the Padres, but like the Padres had such a stacked rotation that, you know, they didn't necessarily need to wait around to see if Logan Allen could blossom, and he won that extra starter job in spring training. You know, he's been not amazing as an Indian, but you know, and he's one of those guys where, how old is he? Like, I'll look it up right now, but you know, he's one of those guys that it's like, you know, he doesn't have to be amazing this year. Yeah, he's 23 years old, so he's got time. And then Tristan Mckenzie is actually a player that was just super hyped for so many years in Cleveland because he was, you know, he was a top prospect. It was like, I think, a second round draft pick. But he was just one of those guys that couldn't stay healthy in the minors. And so he was one of the guys that actually had to be added to the roster to be protected, you know, from the Rule 5 draft. And he made his debut last year, you know, under some dubious circumstances. I think it may have involved an injury or something. But, you know, he struck out 10 hitters in his first major league start, which was pretty cool because, yeah, it was just like, you know, we were waiting for this guy to get to the majors for so freaking long that when he finally got there, and he, you know, he was, a lot of places didn't necessarily consider him a top prospect anymore because of all the injuries, but it was like, there's the talent. That's it. That's the thing. And so if anybody was going to, like, you know, get a real chance and a long leash in the rotation this year after, you know, the Carlos Carrasco trade, which is actually the Francisco Lindor trade, but also the Carlos Carrasco trade. You know, he was the clear guy to take over that number 4 starter role. So if he could stay healthy, that kid has a ton of talent, and you know, he's one of those people with a really, really high ceiling and an incredibly low floor. So we'll see what happens. He's going to be a guy that's really fun to watch.
Okay, well, now I'm excited to see him. That's great. Thank you. You've succeeded in your task and making me excited about irritation even more. This is great. When we think of the Indians, think of good pitching, and they have it yet again. But moving on over to the lineup. So you mentioned Roberto Perez before. He's been there for, it seems like, forever. Really good defensive catcher. I think he won a Gold Glove last year. I feel like he and Christian Vasquez of the Red Sox are two catchers who don't hit a lot, but hit a home run against the Yankees every single series at least once. Because I just have so many visions of both of them just knocking a home run. You're like, what, that guy? Really? So yeah, he makes his money.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's one of those guys that got it was like a really team-friendly extension a couple years ago, like something like 4 years, $9 million. Is the Roberto Perez is the guy that was the backup to Yan Gomes for so many years, who was my favorite player for a long time. But
how about him?
He just has this, like you said, he has this knack for like just getting the most random home runs, including Game 1 of the World Series back in 2016, like 2 bombs, boom. Like I think it became like the second catcher in history to hit 2 home runs in Game 1 of the World Series, which is such a random, useless stat. But I think he had a 22 homer season in 2019 or something. Like he's a guy that you only ask for defense, but can be pleasantly surprised in certain games about his offense.
I think that describes a lot of catchers, and I think that's a good thing to have. And obviously, he's been with them long enough that he knows this pitching staff pretty well, including guys I imagine coming up who we'll see in spring training. That's always really cool to have continuity at catcher, I feel like, because that's he's the quarterback of, in many ways, of that defense. He's calling everything, he's relaying signs, all that stuff, and knowing intimately what each starter and reliever and random kid called up for the day to be an extra arm is capable of is really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. He gets a lot of respect from the pitching staff. I think when Trevor Bauer was pitching for us, he was like Trevor Bauer's personal catcher. Like every game Trevor Bauer was pitching, like you saw Roberto Perez behind the plate. So
Trevor Bauer gets an eye roll from me, but great. That does anytime someone asks for you personally to catch them, that says great things about you, even if the person.
I think Trevor Bauer is a guy you hate if he's not on your team, because he's loud, he's outspoken, he calls things out, and he's just like, as somebody who watched him come up from the minors and everything, like he was always fun to keep tabs on because of the controversy. It's like, oh, what the hell did Trevor Bauer do this time? Cutting his finger with a drone, whatever, and like, I don't know. It's just like, it's fun to see him run his mouth. But if you're on a team that is not that does not have Trevor Bauer, then it's not so fun to see him run his mouth. It's annoying.
To be fair, one of my good friends is a huge Dodgers fan, and she is not enthused to have him on her team. But also, like, the Dodgers didn't need anybody else, and now they've got 17 pitchers. So good for the damn Dodgers over there. But okay, the rest of your infield, we already talked about Jake Bauers a little bit, and then you got Cesar Hernandez at second base, who I think he also won a Gold Glove last year, which I did not remember until I looked at him up before. And we talked about Andres Jimenez at shortstop, and Jose Ramirez, obviously the all-star, the current. I guess he has to be the face of your franchise right now, or unless it's Shane Bieber.
Shane Bieber, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's hard to be a pitcher because they just don't play every day. So, but between the two of them are the two that I would think of first when you talked about Cleveland. And then Yu Chang, who I don't know, who's a backup infielder at like most of the positions. I know nothing about him.
Yeah, it's not much to know. He's one of those guys that is kind of like, for many years, he was blocked by Francisco Lindor. And he was just he was one of those guys that was like sitting on the fringes of the top 10 organizational prospects. Not like a top 100 prospect in baseball, but somebody that got some recognition within the context of the farm system, and especially because he was a shortstop with some power, which hasn't seemed to really translate to the major leagues yet. But there are a couple people in Cleveland, including I run a Cleveland Indians fan site, Always the Jake. And there's another like fan site in the Cleveland sphere that's now called Covering the Corner, used to be called Let's Go Tribe. Now that the name is changing, they had to change their thing. But, you know, we kind of have like a friendly rivalry with them, and they have this obsession with Yu Chang because there is some potential in his bat, and he's not a bad fielder, and he also just has this charisma. You know, there's this picture of him on like one of the first games of the season where it's like snowing hardcore, and he's just sitting there like shivering with his bat with the brightest smile on his face because he's getting to play Major League Baseball. And the, you know, it's just, you know, I don't hold out hope that he'll ever be anything spectacular, but, you know, a guy that can fill in around the diamond and you know, put up serviceable production as he gives guys a day off, like, sure, he could be that guy.
A backup infielder who can play a legitimate shortstop is a valuable commodity if they hit at all. So that sounds valuable to me. And especially if they're going to have fun doing it, then the year that the Yankees, or a couple of years, the Yankees had Ronald Perez, that guy is so funny. Like, I didn't know who the heck he was. He was kind of out of nowhere. He wasn't even a prospect. He was just one of those dudes that came up and had an incredible couple of weeks with the Yankees and helped them, you know, and he similarly could play pretty much anywhere in the infield. Not really a shortstop, but he could pull it off. And he oozed personality, and you could tell how delighted he was to be with the big league team. And that is so much fun to watch.
It really is. I mean, you know, every kid that, I shouldn't say every kid, but so many kids grow up just like dreaming to be able to do that. And the guys that come up and they appreciate it like they do, like, you connect with them, you know, in some deep way. Like, yes, you are grateful for what you are getting to do right now, and I see you. That is fun to watch. I appreciate you. It's funny you mention, you know, if a shortstop can hit, like, you know, they're valuable. The Indians actually have a really stacked farm system full of shortstops, including, I think, this guy named Gabriel Arias. Again, one of those names I haven't heard pronounced enough to remember, but he was a top prospect that I think came back in the Mike Clevenger trade, it may have been, who just like was like kind of the sneaky gem in the trade. So Yu Chang has this terrible career, like unfortunate career circumstance, which is that he was blocked by Francisco Lindor for so long, so he hasn't gotten really a chance to play until now. But he's got a lot of these young, high ceiling guys got to be nipping at his heels. So it's not like he will necessarily have a super long leash forever. Like, he's probably got this year to figure some stuff out. But even you know, like, Andres Jimenez is kind of like showing that he deserves to be in the major leagues. And even behind him, like, Ahmed Rosario is a natural shortstop. And, you know, if he ever figures things out, then, you know, and we get some sort of center fielder, maybe, God willing, someday. You know, it's just kind of interesting for him to know that there's a lot of pressure on him to prove he deserves to stick over some of these guys that are coming up through the farm.
Well, I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens, if that motivates him or if that is too much pressure for him. But presumably, even if he gets kind of pushed out, that's the kind of guy that could get jobs elsewhere just because of the defensive versatility, which is something teams are prioritizing so much more than they used to. Makes sense.
You know, it's interesting. His versatility is not necessarily by nature. It's by design. I believe that the reason he even plays, I think, second or third base sometimes is because, again, like, he was a shortstop, but there was Francisco Lindor. So in order to maybe expedite his path to the majors, he got some playing time with these other positions in the minors. And now he has to kind of play these other positions because there is a natural shortstop still playing the position. So it's versatility is almost like, if you don't become versatile and you're a certain person, you don't get that opportunity. So you have to work that much harder than everybody else to get that shot.
Yeah. If your carrying tool is not going to be an extraordinary hit skill or a jaw-dropping power skill, then you had probably better have some options for yourself for what you can provide to the team on defense. I think that's probably about right. Great. and two, the outfield that we have disparagingly referenced several different times. So you got Eddie Rosario back, which is probably helpful because you really need some outfielders. And then what do I have? I have Jordan Luplow, Josh Naylor, and now center fielder Ahmed Rosario. And I mean, there's nobody in that group that I look at and I'm like, uh-oh, that guy's going to be thinking against us. But also Josh Naylor, if I recall correctly, had an insane 2 games against the Yankees. And I remember his name because I was like, who? What? Who are you? But I don't know if that is any indication of who he actually is, or if he's one of those guys that had one of those series.
Yeah, so Josh Naylor in particular is an interesting name because he was a top prospect that came over in one of these trades. I think it was definitely a trade with the Padres. I think it may have been the Mike Clevenger trade. Josh Naylor was, I think, like one of the main pieces in that. And we were talking about earlier, like top prospects that kind of haven't really worked out. He's one of those guys too, where you look at the lineup and you're like, gosh. And again, I think he's 22 or 23, right? So he has time to figure it out. But that those 2 games against the Yankees last year, where he he was doubling like every other inning, it seemed like.
My end too. That's how it felt. Yes.
Yeah, and for me, it was like, oh my gosh, maybe this game. 2 games is never a sample size you've ever based anything off of in your life, but it's also like when a guy is a top prospect or a former top prospect, right, who has that pedigree and has that potential. It's fun to see him do well because you're like, maybe this is the moment where he catches fire. You see all the time top prospects struggle for years before they finally figure things out. Lucas Giolito of the White Sox, for instance, like that was a guy that was like on any other team, like a team that wasn't a rebuilding team, that guy would not have gotten the chance he did to show his stuff over that many years and to fail for that long before he figured it out. But he has, and he's one of the best pitchers in baseball now. It's by necessity, I kind of have to hold out hope that Josh Naylor ends up being one of those guys because, Clevenger was another one of those guys that was like, it's kind of like, I didn't want to see him go. It wasn't even a money thing necessarily. And, the Indians have this nasty habit lately of trading on pitchers right before they get injured. So it's like, it's not like they've gotten the short end of the stick in the deal or anything, but if Josh Naylor ends up being really good, it makes that Mike Clevenger trade look not so terrible.
Yep. That seems right to me. Well, I'm interested to see what he does, preferably against other teams and not mine. So that pretty much sums up the roster. I think. Oh, we didn't say this, but Franmil Reyes still with the team, DH only, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, fun guy to watch. Like just one of those guys that when he gets hot, he's a terror, and when he's cold, he is not so much a terror. But like he's a guy that's a threat to hit 5 home runs in 3 games at any given time. You never know when it's going to happen. So it's like
those guys. Those are fun guys.
Yes, he is like I don't know. He's the baseball version of a heart palpitation. It's like, oh, there it comes, and now it's gone.
That's great. I love that. So given that roster, I'm going to ask what you think kind of the best and worst case scenarios for the team are this year. And maybe even if you want to throw out a prediction about the American League Central, I would be willing to hear it, but no obligation. You're on the spot.
Sure. Yeah. Oh boy. It's, you mentioned the Cleveland Indians being a team that you think of for pitching, being really good, and the offense being like, that pile of misfit toys may not work out. So the best case scenario for the Cleveland Indians this year is Shane Bieber holds down the fort, wins another Cy Young, right? So like Plesac rebounds to show what he showed last year, and then the younger guys in the rest of the young guys in the rotation, I should say, because they're all like 25 or younger or something. They live up to their potential, or at least Logan Allen serves as some sort of a reasonable 5th starter, right? And the best case scenario for the offense being, some of these guys like Josh Naylor and Andres Jimenez and even Ahmed Rosario, maybe, even Jake Bowers, you can't entirely give up on because he's young. Like some of these guys, like there are so many guys in that group that have the potential to explode, right? To be one of those guys that has struggled for 2 years and finally figures it out. So the best case scenario probably is 2 or 3 of those guys actually do figure it out. And put together some really good seasons and become a fixture in the Indians lineup for years to come. And they win 90, 92 games. That could happen. That is, that's not even an outlandish best case scenario. That is just like if the pitching does what we believe it can do and the offense has some of these breakouts, they could end up 90, 92, maybe second place in the AL Central because the Twins, well, this is my best case scenario. Let's say this, in the best case scenario, the Twins don't do as good as we think, right? And, that division is kind of fairly competitive this year. We've seen it be trash in years past, but last year with that three-way race between the White Sox, the Twins, and the Indians, and even now, like the Tigers are not doing horribly as they have been in past years. So worst case scenario, Shane Bieber gets injured, Zach Plesac regresses. A lot of the rotation doesn't kind of hold up to the pinnacle rotation that we know the Indians for in recent years. And a lot of these young guys never figure it out. They could be a 70-win team, 68, and they could end up fourth place in the Central, like just above the Royals. That could very easily happen as well. And that's what's so nerve-wracking about this Indians team is that the best and worst case scenario are both so far apart and both so like interchangeably likely. Like it's you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that could happen. That could happen too. There's really no, I don't know. There's no obvious route for them to go. So that's kind of, the most likely scenario to me, 86 wins, the pitching carries the team, the offense does just enough, and they sneak in with a wild card.
Yeah. As the great Yankees radio announcer John Sterling says, you can't predict baseball, Susan. And that is true. You cannot. Susan Waldman, his partner, agrees. But it is so easy to see both those things happening. I get you. I'm not even sure what I think is going to happen in that division. I have been so back and forth. First of all, the Twins are off to a terrible start. And I say that as someone whose team is also off to a terrible start. The Twins are in about the same boat. And second of all, I wouldn't sleep on the Royals. I'm not sure they're guaranteed to finish last. They are certainly not going to be great, but they've got enough interesting pieces and they're playing shockingly well in the admittedly very early going. I don't know. I agree with you. I kind of think the Central, I think people were really high on the White Sox, understandably, because they have a lot of exciting young talent. Obviously, some injuries have cut into that a bit, and they haven't been playing their best. But the Twins also, are the multi-time defending division champs that everyone seems to forget about. And people have kind of written off Cleveland because of all these trades they made. But as we can see, they certainly have the potential on that roster they could win that division. It would take everything going right, but they could also very easily have just some things go right and be a playoff team.
Yeah, Jose Ramirez is a near guarantee for an 8-war season.
Yep.
The problem is any of these young kind of high potential but struggling guys that we've talked about ad nauseum in this conversation, it doesn't seem like any of them are particularly likely to just figure it out permanently. And that would have to happen with a couple of them in order for this offense to really give the pitching staff the run support that it needs. So that'll be the thing to watch this year is the X factors of, Andres Jimenez, who's kind of doing all right in the early going, Josh Naylor, even Ahmed Rosario, and then who else did we talk about? There's one more name, maybe Jake Bowers could still figure it out. And then, if that happens, then people should not sleep on the Indians.
Yeah.
So, and if you flip a coin enough times, you're going to get heads. So we'll see.
Great philosophy and very true. And I was going to ask you to tell me about a player on your team I might not know that I should love, but I'm not going to ask you that because I think I've already decided that it's going to be Yu Chang because I didn't know who that was. And now I'm really excited about him just as a fun personality. So consider yourself having already answered that question without my having asked it. So well done.
Yeah, I'm happy to help in any way I can.
So okay, I think that is there anything thoughts on your current roster before I move on to something else? Because is there anything I didn't touch on?
Not necessarily with the current roster. I think one thing that I'll give you that's interesting is the Indians don't have a top 10 farm system right now. But they have one of the youngest talent bases in all of baseball. Like the average age of their top 30 prospects is like obscenely low, like lower than any. Last I checked, it was like a lot lower than any other top 30 prospect list in the major. So check back by midseason. And there are going to be some names cropping up on these top 100 lists that are going to be names to watch for the future. It's interesting how like there's still potential in the lineup, but it's almost as though they've sneakily compiled a really cool farm system of really talented, very young players that will come up and support the major league club a couple years from now.
That's always great to know. Yes, I consider myself a big baseball fan, but I could not tell you anybody in Cleveland's farm system at this present moment. So that's very useful information. I feel like the Yankees are always a medium farm system because they never pick high in the draft and whatever. But they also, the talent that they do have is mostly really, really young pitching. So I can relate to that. It's like, oh, this is so cool. We'll see you in 5 years. That's going to be nice.
Watch out for a name Nolan Jones. If you don't know any prospects in the Indian system, that's their number one prospect right now. He's a third baseman by trade, so obviously he's blocked by Jose Ramirez. But it may be a reason why Andres Jimenez might have a short leash or if Cesar Hernandez struggles, or he could be maybe used in the outfield. I think they've been testing him in left field. So like he is a hitting guy. He's not necessarily like projected for like extraordinary power, but like really, really good hitting. And he's one of those guys that's kind of only not on the roster right now because of service time. So you might see him in May or June.
Cool. Okay, I'm really excited about that. Thank you. Do you think they would move Ramirez, or do you think he's too solidly in terms of third base? Like, would they put him at first?
No. They would not put him at first base. He's just too useful in the infield, there was a thing a couple of years ago where like he was bouncing between, because he's a natural shortstop, right? But when
Is he?
Oh yeah, he is. But he played second base when so he was a shortstop as a stopgap for Francisco Lindor, so that the team could suppress Lindor's service time many years ago. And then Jason Kipnis got injured that year. So he got to play some second base. But then Jason Kipnis came back, so he moved to third base as an experiment. And so he ended up having to shift back and forth between third base and second base based on convenience. And at one point he said, oh, look, I know you guys are using me for this. I appreciate that, but it makes it hard to focus on hitting. So I would love to either play second base or play third base. Please pick one. And so for that reason, I don't think he'll move off of third base at any point. I think that's just his position now.
Great. I didn't know any of that. That's really interesting. I did not, I don't know. I didn't have him in my head as someone who was, had the range for shortstop, but I guess he does. And that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. He was never supposed to be anything. Like he was just supposed to be a Yu Chang, but he just like exploded out of absolutely nowhere, just like Corey Kluber.
Yeah.
So that was, that's Jose Ramirez's story, and it's pretty cool. He was like just like a afterthought from some guy at some training facility who was actually trying to, bid on some other player. And
love those stories.
Yeah.
And he saw this guy. We're like, oh yeah, you're good. We'll take you. That's great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, thank you for telling me that. And now I'm excited to watch for your top prospect to come up. That should be fun. It's always fun mid-season when all of a sudden this influx of guys appears and new talent.
Let's see what happens.
What's going to happen? Awesome. Okay, well, I'm excited. We've actually mentioned this a couple times, talking about the name change. So obviously Indians as a name is somewhat problematic. And in our current age of noticing these things more and perhaps taking care of them, maybe some teams, perhaps the Indians have said, is it definite they're changing it for next year, or is that still kind of wishy-washy maybe?
No, that seems like, I mean, it was sort of a maybe they're going to change it this year, but I think I think the definite plan is to change it next year, and I don't know, they're just kind of lollygagging, if that's like the correct term. They're dragging their feet on it a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that the plan is that it happens next year permanently.
Cool. I'm excited for that. So I'm going to just throw some things out to you that I read in terms of possible names. And I'm curious both what you think of these and would you, if you have any in your brain, think would be better. So things I saw, popular ones were the Cleveland Spiders, because there was at one point a team called that in Cleveland. My favorite thing about that is the logo is badass. I love it. It's like the baseball is the body part of the spider. It's just a really neat logo. That's my attachment to that one. Then the Cleveland Guardians, and I've been to Cleveland once, but I was in high school and I don't remember anything about it. So apparently there are these pylons that guard traffic. That sounds neat and sounds like a big stone monster could be the mascot, which I'd be really into. The Cleveland Rockers is a thing, but if you're going to do that, I would just call them the Cleveland Rocks because that's funny for me personally. Then I also saw and then two that are based on former stars with the Indians, the Cleveland Naps, which you can just see when a game gets too long and boring, the puns just write themselves. And then the Cleveland Fellers, which I hadn't noticed was in the ether until today, and I'm obsessed with that because it's like the most happy feller. It's those fellers in Cleveland, as also obviously Bob Feller. And then the last one I saw was the Cleveland Crows, which that doesn't do much for me except that it's alliterative, which is always nice, and a crow is a bird, so it's an easy mascot. That's what I read. You tell me what you think.
It's kind of like you said, like the spiders is the one that fans are like, oh, this is kind of the coolest. I also really like Guardians because, like you said, it's just something that's cool and specific to Cleveland and invites a very unique mascot. I know a lot of people in Cleveland who are just sick of the whole associating Cleveland with rock and roll thing, and I don't know why. I don't understand why. I think the Cleveland Rock would be pretty cool with some sort of like slashy mascot, long hair, shredding on guitar. It's like there's the Utah Jazz, and there could be the Cleveland Rock. Why?
Plus, your mascot could have a cool pet rock along with him for double meaning, and you could create some kind of cool Stonehenge situation in the stadium. There's a lot you could do with rock.
Sure, that could happen. That's yeah. Other than those three names, which are kind of like the more common ones, and spiders especially seeming to be sort of the fan favorite, everything else kind of sucks. There have been people that I know, like from my fan site's Twitter account, I tweeted on April Fool's Day this year, we're named the Cleveland Blue Sox now. This is terrible.
All that. And I was like, why do we need more socks?
Yeah, we don't. You want to complete the American flag trifecta? Fine, but don't do it with my city.
Also, if you're gonna be a sock color, like, okay, pet peeve. I love blue; it's a great color, but so many uniforms are blue. If you're gonna go with a new team name, go for a rebrand that gives you a whole different color. Like, how about the pink socks? Not enough pink in sports. I love it. Or even like, I know the Rockies have purple, but you're not in their division. Purple, orange, something that is like fun.
Yeah, you kind of can't have the Cleveland Rock and the Colorado Rockies, can you?
Yes, you can. You have the White Sox. You have the Reds and the Red Sox.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. I just think any mascot being Sox takes the ferocity away from competitive sports entirely. Like, look at this ferocious sock puppet attacking I don't know. And it's like, so like, what do you have then as your mascot? You have the Red Sox have a thing with a baseball head, right? Or is that the Reds?
No. They have a guy they have a big green guy. He's the Green Monster. I think his name is Wally because he's a wall because the Green Monster is a wall. I don't know. It's not great.
The problem with having a terrible team name is that the mascot potential is just not there.
I prefer it were a life-size sock puppet with like fangs. That could be. I mean, think about this: if the sock was a giant sock, like a sock that would fit a giant, and like Jack and the Beanstalk giant, that thing with actual sharp fangs is terrifying. That could just eat you.
Yep, that's true. It's interesting. There are so many bird names, with teams that, it's funny that the state bird of Ohio is the Cardinals, and
Ha!
that's
You can't have
so.
that.
Yeah, can't have the Cardinals and the Cardinals. That's where we draw the line. So nobody knows what it will be. There's a chance it could be the Cleveland baseball team for a gap year, but
Why?
I think if it were the Guardians or the Spiders, most fans would be pretty happy. And outside of that, I don't know if I've heard anything particularly awesome.
Okay, I'm pretty into those. The Spiders was the first one that I had heard, and I just really loved the branding. But today, when I was reading about the Guardians, I think that's awesome. It reminds me of gargoyles, something stone easily animate. That is really fun. So I'm with you. Those two both sound good to me, and the sooner they do it, the better. And you've had so much time to think about it. Why would you have to take a gap year? Like, what are we, indecisive college or high school seniors? Like, just pick a thing.
I mean, look, it's easy enough to rebrand the Spiders or the Guardians, right? It's just, I don't know. It's a big decision figuring out what to rename your baseball franchise. The cool thing about the Spiders is the team has already been the Spiders, so all these people, the jerks in Cleveland that are like, oh, but it's heritage, it's history. It's like, oh, guess what was heritage before it was heritage? Was the Spiders. So we're not changing the team name, we're just changing it back.
There you go.
That could kind of dump water on that stupid fire. As you mentioned, it's just kind of like, it's a problematic name. It's, I don't know, it's naming a team after any, race is just like, it was not considered, nobody really noticed or I guess thought about it as problematic for a very long time. And now you look at it and you're like, oh, Chief Wahoo. That was kind of, we maybe shouldn't have done that.
A little cringy, yeah.
Yeah. And I loved Chief Wahoo growing up. Like, I was just a kid in Ohio that was taught to love Chief Wahoo. We had a coloring contest on my school bus one year, and I drew a picture of Chief Wahoo that was really good and won a Butterfinger. Great memories with Chief Wahoo. And now it's like, yeah, that was a really weird thing to have as a mascot, wasn't it? So, I'm not any particular person that's been like fist pumped, like we have to change this name now. I hate it, but I've also been like, yeah, it should probably be changed. And when that happens, I am there for it.
All right. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for that to happen. Presumably on the student side. Great. I there's intrigue, and I love intrigue, and I also, we'll get to this in a little bit, but I also am obsessed with mascots. So that a new one being born will be a great thrill for me, no matter what it is.
That's true. And now that you're talking about it, I would love to see a really awesome Guardian mascot dancing around Progressive Field. That would be really fun.
This is also a great segue, because the next thing I wanted to talk about actually was Progressive Field. So I have never been, but I have a mission to go to all of the stadiums, which obviously has been put on hold for quite some time because I haven't been anywhere except for this very small area of this island for over a year. It's been really fun. But Cleveland for sure on my list. Tell me, I assume I know you grew up in Cleveland, so you've clearly been there a lot, or the previous iteration. Tell me what it's like and what you think.
Yeah, so it used to be Jacobs Field. It used to be the Jake, which is why my Twitter handle @alwaysthejake came to be, because nobody wants their team name changed to, for capitalism's sake. But now it's Progressive Field, and it's the same beautiful place. It's a really neat stadium. The story behind it is that, way back when, it was Cleveland Municipal Stadium, right, which could seat, I think it was something absurd, like 80,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was just too big of a ballpark to get a large, like, to get an inundated fan presence in there. So, the Jacobs back in, I think it was 93 or 94. 94 may have been the first year that the stadium was open. Like, they created a smaller, tighter stadium, and it seats, I think, something like 44,000, which is better size for a ballpark. Sounds about right. And from pretty much at some point that year, that ballpark, the excitement of a new ballpark and the excitement of the team being really good for the first time in like 50 years or 40 years or something, that stadium sold out for 455 consecutive games.
Wow.
Yeah. And so next to all the retired jersey numbers in that park, there's also one that says 455, the fans.
Cool. I love that.
So like that's kind of immortalized in that park, and seeing that section, it's really cool. And seeing the statues out front, where Jim Thome now has a statue out front, has just always been like a really powerful thing for me. Because I grew up watching Jim Thome. And obviously, like, I'm biased because I have a lot of good memories at that park, but like, there's way out in left field, there's this home run porch, right? It's like next to the bleachers. It's just kind of like, I think there's a Pepsi logo somewhere, but like fans can just like stand there and watch the game from that little random cement porch. And I have seen so many great, meaningful home runs fly over and bounce on the cement, and take that giant bounce really high, and watch all the fans like gather around and wait for it to come down. There's a really short right field wall.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
Yeah, there you go. Right. But that's why so many, like, I don't know, like that. I think, several players from the Indians have gone to the Yankees, like left-handed hitters like Travis Hafner, who went that one year. It's just like, yeah, this makes sense because you have a habit of hitting balls over a short right field porch. And so, that's Cleveland over the years has just had very balanced lineups, and sometimes a little too lefty heavy. And I think that's partially by design because, somebody that works in a baseball front office once told me, like, your stadium is not your be all end all, but if you're not somewhat tailoring your offensive strategy to your stadium, or your pitching strategy to your stadium, like a little bit, you're kind of being naive or dumb or whatever it was that he said. And so Cleveland over the years has had a lot of very good, left-handers taking advantage of that short wall. And then on the opposite side is a giant 19-foot, left field wall, which, as a team that goes to Fenway 10 times a year, like, what that's like too. So
love it.
It's just like there's so much, even just in the home run hitting of that stadium, there's so many quirks and nuances to appreciate, especially like when that ball comes down on that giant 19-foot wall in left field, and you're wondering, like, oh my gosh, is it going to hit that wall and bounce off, or is it going to sneak over? It's some pretty cool. I love the stadium. I do. It's a great field.
That's great. I can't wait to go. You've sold me. I mean, I was already sold on going, but that sounds incredible. I didn't mention it before, but your lineup even right now is, I don't know if we got like fearsome power hitting lefties, but there are a lot of lefties in your lineup, and knowing that about your stadium makes a lot of sense. Whereas the Yankees, who have a very short right field porch, have basically no lefties. So sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. Cool. So the nice question about your stadium is that when I go, what should I expect? Like, are Cleveland fans gonna be booing me, or are they kind of just live and let live with enemy fans?
The Yankees are the one team that Clevelanders really dislike.
You replace Clevelanders with anybody, and that would be true.
I guess that's true too. But like, it's funny because like, it's almost like, the Cleveland Indians consider the Yankees one of their top rivals, but the Yankees, when they think of rivals, they probably don't even really think about the Cleveland Indians. But like, there have been some pretty heavy playoff matchups over the years. 2017, last year, 95. Like that when Sandy Alomar hit that home run off of Mariano Rivera in 97, I think it was. It feels like the Yankees are a team the Indians have met in the playoffs a lot, and it feels like a lot of the Indians fan favorites have gone on to play for the Yankees who could afford to pay them. Even Corey Kluber right now, which the Indians could have afforded on that $10 million deal, is like, now Corey Kluber's pitching for the Yankees. It's like, I don't know. if you go to Progressive Field, I mean, it's a Midwestern fan base. So unless you're literally, I mean, you would literally be rooting for the opposing team, I guess, which is the thing. But it's always going to be like a friendly jeering that you're going to get. It's not going to be like when Tigers fans see relatives in the, or not relatives, rivals in the stands, or some other cities. Like if a Red Sox fan saw a Yankees fan in their stadium, like they're going to hate them. They're going to boo. Indians fans will give you a good-natured verbal jab or two, and then you know, share some of their peanuts with you.
I'm super into that. So if I go to Cleveland, I will be very excited to get lovingly jeered and then have a great chat with what it seems like a very knowledgeable fan base. That's exciting. And you mentioned peanuts. So my next question to you is, are there signature food and drink items that are unique to or special in Progressive Field?
Sure. So one quick note.
Oh, yeah.
If Aroldis Chapman pitches in the stadium, Aroldis Chapman will get booed in Cleveland.
That's fair.
Yeah, well, and not just because of the domestic violence issues or, you know, being great against us every time he pitched for you in the playoffs, but also because he was, you know, the Cubs closer in the 2016 World Series.
Oh, I remember vividly, yes.
Yeah. So, but Sugardale Dollar Dogs, that's kind of the thing. Including it may not be Dollar Dog Night when you're there, but Sugardale hot dogs are like, it's not like I'm not going to pretend our hot dogs are any different than anybody else's hot dogs. But it's just a thing that, you know, fans generally, when you think of ballpark food at Progressive Field, you think of Sugardale Dollar Dogs. Yeah, other than that, I can't really think of any like specific, we don't have any of those like crazy, like donut bun hot dogs that like the Phillies have or whatever it is, or any of the crazy stadium food that some of these other places have. I may be mistaken about that. There may be something I'm not thinking of, but I've never been one that really buys ballpark food when I go anyway, because I'm like, you know, I'll just, you know, sneak in my own bag of popcorn or something. I don't feel like spending $20 on a meal at the ballpark.
This is fair. I do enjoy a hot dog at a game. I never heard of that brand of hot dog. Now I'm very excited. Certainly Yankee Stadium never has Dollar Dog Night ever in any circumstance. So that would be cool. I should probably try to get there for that. Not that it doesn't matter. I don't want that many hot dogs. I want like one to try it. What I want in the stadium is I want a tasting platter. I just want, let me try a little bit of everything. They don't offer that, I know, but that's my dream. My dream is more regional specialties in stadiums and letting me eat all of them. That's what I hope.
Oh, you know what? So I just Googled this. Oh, yeah. I forgot that there's a melt in the right field district of Progressive Field, which is it's like a Cleveland restaurant group that's independently owned, but they have a melt restaurant in Progressive Field that's like, I believe their thing is just melting cheese on anything that you can imagine. Grilled cheese specifically.
Yeah.
And then I guess there's a menu option including chorizo and potato, barbecue pork, and it says that the kindergartner is their standard grilled cheese. So I definitely know of Melt, and I know that their grilled cheese sandwiches are famous. So if you actually go to that ballpark, you should probably try a Melt grilled cheese sandwich.
I will. I'm promising you on the air that I will do that. I love grilled cheese. That sounds great. Oh, thank you. This made me hungry.
Accountable on the air.
Yes, now it's on the internet forever, so I cannot live it down. Must have Melt. Okay, so I have one last thing, which is I want to talk about, we mentioned mascots and how much I love them and how excited I am about your potential new one. But I have to tell you, I looked up your current one because I couldn't think of what it was. I knew that it wasn't Chief Wahoo. That was just a guy on a lot of gear until recently. And I looked it up and I had never seen this thing before in my life. Slider, apparently, which fair, that's both a baseball term and a food item. So good mascot name. But like, what the heck is it? It's a big Muppet looking pink furred creature with what looks like a walrus beard in yellow for a nose. And then, yeah, I mean, he's wearing the jersey. I read a little about him and I learned that he debuted in 1990 and was inspired by the Fanatic, which it seems like a whole generation of mascots looked at the Philly Fanatic and thought, yeah, that works. I was just talking to my a Braves fan recently because they're playing them right now. And Blooper, who's very new, literally a couple years ago, also very similar to the Philly fanatic. So that's interesting. But I wonder, I don't know anything about this guy. Tell me, what is Slider's deal?
I don't know. He's like if the abominable snowman accidentally got washed with your Red Sox. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's just kind of this thing that I accept that's in the ballpark, and that maybe looks fun to kids. But it's just kind of like a fat pink gorilla that dances sometimes, and I'm like, okay, you do your thing, Slider. I don't know. It's not like my fondest memories of the ballpark are associated with Slider, but I know who Slider is, and it's not the worst mascot in the world, I guess, and it's like it's funny to see him like chasing things around the field or whatever. There's definitely a weird rivalry in Cleveland with this hot dog race that they do, again tied to the Sugardale Dollar Dogs, where there are 3 hot dogs, one with mustard, one with ketchup, and one with relish. And at some point during the game, they all race around the field, and there's this running joke between one of the reporters and the mustard one giving him a hard time. So there's this rivalry between the reporter and the mustard hot dog. But that's another weird little quirk that you might notice at Progressive Field is the hot dog race.
Okay, I love that. So I was only aware of the president's race at Nationals Park, where they have 4 big-headed presidents race. I was not aware that most parks have this, and I learned in my Atlanta episode, you know what they have race? Tools, like power tool, like a saw. And as it seems like a terrible message to send to children that just run with your saw. Like, no, bad idea. At least, I mean, I wouldn't really run with a hot dog either because you might drop it and that'd be really sad. But at least a running hot dog is a blunt object that's not going to hurt you.
You know what I've always disliked is every time I go to Yankee Stadium, that subway car race, virtual, man.
Well, because we don't have a mascot or anything real on the field, because on the field, it's only about serious baseball. We don't have any fun, fluffy beings to embody the spirit of joy. The joy is winning.
Why bother with a virtual race that has a preset result? I mean, I guess we're waiting to see it, but it's like, I don't know. I always found that strange about going to Yankee Stadium with all the good stuff that's there. That was the one thing that's always been like, okay, your subway car race doesn't interest me very much.
It's a weird one. And I'd also especially weird because if you're a New Yorker and you're watching that, anytime the B train wins, you're like, I call shenanigans on that because that's a local train on the same track as the D train.
Yeah.
So there's no chance. If you get on a B train or a D train at Columbus Circle, the D train is getting to Yankee Stadium like in half the time. So it is really crazy. I guess there are parts of Brooklyn where they're kind of around the same track, so maybe that's it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then the other one is like the 4, which, okay, yeah, that goes to Yankee Stadium, so that's why. Those are the trains that go to Yankee Stadium. So it does make sense geographically, and a different train does win every time. So I don't know. You're right. It's not particularly satisfying, but it's a thing that they will never let go of. That's okay. Of all the things, like at least on the scoreboard, so you can ignore it if you want to.
Yep, that's true. Yep, that's fair.
Amazing. Okay, before I let you go, because you spent a very long time talking with me, which I appreciate, I have one game I would love to play. It is low pressure, and you won't win or lose right now. It's a kind of a long-term game, and it is called the match-up game, which is obviously a play on the match game, but it's nothing like the match game. What I have here is you can't see them because they're off camera, but I've got 4 baseball hats, and they all have names in them. One is Cleveland hitters, one is Cleveland pitchers. Then I got the same for the Yanks and 2 other hats. And what I would like to do is draw 5 hitter and pitcher combos and have us each predict an at-bat result for that combo. And in the interest of creating a lot of work for myself during the baseball season, I'm tracking all this. And if any of the predicted results actually come to pass, that person will get a point each time it happens. Now, we only play 7 games, so it's possible that none of these will happen. But the idea is whoever accrues more points over the course of the season series will be owed a drink by the person who accrued fewer points when we're in the same city, preferably at a game.
That's great. Which could happen this year.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, well, especially because we're in the same city, it seems more likely to happen than some people who are like, I am in Detroit. It's like, okay, see you sometime. Great. So because you are the home team in this game, because this is all about the Indians tonight, would you prefer to have the 3 matchups that have Cleveland pitching or 3 that have Cleveland hitting?
Pitching.
Yeah, that's probably right. I asked it and I was like, I think I know what the answer is. Okay, well, in that case, we're going to start in that case by drawing a Cleveland pitcher. This is the good part of it. This is the good TV part where I look away from the camera a lot. This is really amusing TV. So enjoy, everybody. Okay. I got Cleveland pitchers here, and I am going to draw a name, which is James Karinchak. And then on the Yankees hitter side, we're going to see if he matches up against Aaron Judge.
Ooh.
Good matchup.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess the goal is to pick the one that's going to happen the most times. And, you know, I want to pick home run because Aaron Judge, I mean, James Karinchak has a bad habit of just like, you know, every once in a while leaving a random meatball. But I think also with Aaron Judge's propensity for strikeouts, I think strikeout is a lot more likely to happen. So yeah. I'm going with strikeout.
Yeah, I think that's a totally valid choice. I think I am going to go home run just because I think that'd be fun for me. And I think it is totally a feasible thing to have happen.
Yeah. It is.
I think you made the wise strategy choice. So we're okay. You're going to strike out.
But they both will happen. I feel like strikeout will happen more.
Potentially. It's also unclear how many times they will actually match up. I don't know. I mean, to be fair, I guess righty. Judge is usually in a pretty righty-heavy part of the lineup, so Karinchak would be a logical choice to pitch to that top of the order. So we might see it a couple times. We'll find out.
Yeah.
All right. Going the other way, the Yankees pitching. We've got Jordan Montgomery, who is a left-handed starter. Big dude. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is one of the guys. I mean, I being a raging homer, I am predicting a lot of guys have a big year, but Jordan Montgomery is one of them. I really think he has a lot going for him, and he is now in his second year removed from Tommy John. So I think it's going to be good. Cool. And we'll see what he does against Roberto Perez.
You know, Jordan Montgomery is not a big strikeout guy. And kind of Roberto Perez is lackluster as his offensive profile is. He's not necessarily a major strikeout guy either. It's Roberto Perez right-handed? Yeah. I want to have to say slap single.
Great. I'll buy it. I'm going to go with a ground out to short.
Okay. Do we want to get that specific with it?
I have been for most part because I don't know because
it's more fun that way.
Yeah,
sure.
But I will say that in the I've been tracking so far, not a lot of hits. I mean, in terms of correctness.
But sure, well, you know, even the best hitters only get a hit like 3 out of 10 times.
That's the spirit. That we're doing great. We're all doing great. All right, back to Cleveland pitching. We've got your closer, Emanuel Klosse, versus Aaron Hicks, our switch hitting center fielder.
Yeah. Oof. Line out.
Good.
Yeah. Aaron Hicks hits the ball like on the nose. He's not an insane home run hitter. He does kind of have that power, but he makes good contact. But I'm thinking most of the time when he makes that good contact, it's going into the glove of the second baseman or the left fielder or right fielder. Yeah.
Yeah, because he'll that lefty in that matchup. His lefty side is his more power heavy side, but yeah, I don't have guesses yet. I'm gonna guess a walk. Because actually, Aaron Hicks's major talent is drawing a ton of walks. So I think late in the game he might have that discipline we're looking for and draw a walk.
Cool.
Alrighty. What am I up to? Yankees pitching. We've got Jonathan Loaizaga. He's having a great year for himself so far. Righty reliever. And let's see what he would do against Cesar Hernandez.
Ooh.
Switch hitter, I believe.
Yeah, Loizaga's a righty, right? Yeah. Cesar Hernandez is a contact guy too. I've predicted enough positive results for the Indians from pitcher and hitter both. I'm gonna say ground out to, let's say the hot corner.
A good one. That's good. I'm gonna have him fly out to right.
Okay.
That's what I'm going for. Big Aaron Judge catch. Major highlight for everyone. Okay, and then last but not least, we got a Cleveland pitcher in the body of Aaron Civale, whatever his name is, haven't decided. Him. And he'll be facing Gary Sanchez, our catcher.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely fly out. Gary Sanchez is right-handed, right? Yeah, fly out to left field, I guess that would be.
Yeah. That's a good guess. I know I've been really struggling because I always want to predict the outcome that I want to have happen in these, but I am, and I would like to profess before I say what I'm about to say that I'm a huge Gary Sanchez believer, documented well everywhere. I think he's gonna have a great year, but I'm going strikeout for this one because he does do that kind of a lot. He may also have a big hit in the game, but I think he'll strike out at least once.
Yeah, it's interesting because Aaron Civale isn't a major strikeout pitcher. He's actually like on the lower side in that regard, but Gary Sanchez is a kind of a strikeout guy, so that could very well happen several times.
So far this year, we'll see if it's been like 16 games, but he has lowered his strikeout rate significantly so far. I have no idea if he'll keep it up, but that would be fun. Yeah. Anyway, I guess we'll find out. Cool. Okay, thank you for playing with me. That's great. I will track this, and everyone will be waiting with bated breath to see whether we got any of these right. Amazing. So that's all I have. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure you got out of your system?
There was one thing earlier, that I thought about and never mentioned. We talked a little bit about Josh Naylor, who's a Yankee killer in the playoffs, apparently. His younger brother, Bo Naylor, is a top prospect in the Cleveland Indians system as a catcher. So you could see him in the next year or two. And there'd be two brothers playing on the same team. So that may be some interesting little fan tidbit to keep in your back pocket.
That's fantastic. I'm rooting for that. That doesn't happen very often, so that would be extremely enjoyable.
Yeah, we would be the first time in Cleveland that I can think of since Robbie and Sandy Alomar.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to have two guys in the same family that have that much talent and that much, frankly, good fortune to make it to the major league. Yeah. So to be on the same team, not good odds. That's fantastic. Let's do it.
Like a brother's power bonus or something, like a video game, like when they're playing together, they get like a stat boost.
Maybe they will because they're feeling that they want to outslug each other or something. That'd be fun.
That makes more sense than the way I said it.
But I got where you were going. Just slight human psychological twist to it, which is beat brother. Yeah. Cool. Incredible. Well, thank you so much for taking this time with me. This was a really delightful conversation and has made me even more excited to watch these 4 games we have coming up this week.
Yeah, me too. Man, I forgot it was a 4-game series. That is going to be a lot of fun, isn't it? Yes. Well, I will be sure to shoot you a text message whenever one of those happenings happens or doesn't happen.
Please do. I delight in getting texts from baseball fans of all kinds because so many fun things happen. It's nice to talk about them with other awesome, exciting fans.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on your show.
We'll watch the games. It'll be great. I hope it's a good series. And we'll probably talk again at some point. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Love it.
Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.